Micah Parsons requests a trade with the Dallas Cowboys, and they might just be dumb enough to do it. We'll discuss on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso. With the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert, the legacy, Louis DiBiase. On today's episode, we're going to talk about a big weekend of news in the NFL. James Cook sitting out of practice in Buffalo. We got an injury in Buffalo to discuss. Also, we're going to talk about some teams that could potentially trade for Micah Parsons after that big-time trade request. And, of course, that's where we will start. Before we dive in, I do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen and being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. So, of course, the big bombshell at the start of the weekend, Micah Parsons requests a trade from the Dallas Cowboys. And I'll throw it to my guy Landon McCool from Locked On Cowboys to break down the news.
The Micah Parsons contract drama has taken a new step. Hi, I'm Landon McCool with the Locked On Cowboys podcast. And despite everyone trying their best to try to talk about football, contract stuff still kind of crops up. And a big new bombshell has been dropped as Micah Parsons has officially requested a trade from the Dallas Cowboys. I have doubts that we've seen our last snaps with Micah Parsons as a Dallas Cowboy. This seems like another acceleration in kind of the war of words that these two sides are having. But there's also a lot of love between these two groups. And despite some of the things that were said by Micah on Twitter, I still feel like a deal that is mostly being argued over the length of time is probably going to get done at the end of the day. But for more on this, make sure you check us out on the Locked On Cowboys podcast. And for more on your team, make sure you check out the other teams on the Locked On Podcast Network.
So, Louis, I guess I push back a little bit on the idea that the reason the deal isn't done is just the length of time. I think that is the biggest part of this story, is we are to a place now where Micah isn't looking at just the details of the contract. He's like, you tried to go around my agent's back and essentially trick me into taking a deal that wasn't what was best for me, but was what was best for you. You're just trying to, the hired professional that I have on retainer to make sure that I don't get screwed in these conversations. You're trying to go behind his back to get this done. That is personal. That is, hey, I am trying to trick you. I'm trying to cheat you. I'm trying to, and I'm sure that, a Cowboys fan or someone defending Jerry Jones could explain it in a different way. But when I read what Micah Parsons put out there about the way it went down and the private negotiation, and now he won't call the agent back and won't do any, the insults hurled at the agent earlier in the offseason, like, at that point, it's not just contract details and guaranteed here and guaranteed then. Now it is personal. It is personal. So I think it's more than just, hey, if the Cowboys offered the right thing, Micah would be happy in a day. I mean, maybe I'm naive to think that, but it does seem like it's crossed a point bigger than that.
This has nothing to do with length, term, any sort of money involved in the contract. The reason no deal is done yet is because everything has to be on Jerry Jones's terms. Like, he has the biggest ego of any owner in football. Yes. It's why the Dallas Cowboys have not been relevant since the VHS was the main playback system of the entire country. So right. That's why. I mean, you hear, I believe everything Parsons said about him trying to go around the agent's back, but because it has to be on Jerry Jones's terms. Like, instead of just being proactive and getting this deal done, because Landon's right. Micah Parsons is going to be a Dallas Cowboy, but that shows the flawed part of this entire process. You know he's going to be on your team. You know you're going to pay him. Why are you splitting hairs over maybe a few $1 million or a year or two or guaranteed money? It's only because Jerry Jones, like, he doesn't want anybody else to have the power, any sort of power. It has to all be in his hands, and he dictates terms. It's why he's reactive with pretty much every contract extension that he's had. And I just think that's bad business, because other free agents and players around the league are going to see that and be like, why would I ever want to play for that football team? And I don't know. Like, if you know he's going to be on your team long term, why are you dragging your feet? It's honestly going to cost you more money in the end anyway, because the longer you wait, the more other extensions come in, the more Parsons' value goes up. Like, that's why, like, the team I cover, the Philadelphia Eagles, they get deals done years in advance, or they trade a guy right away, like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, so they avoid this kind of mess. But Jerry Jones just seems to stumble into this all the time because this is just his process, and it's why they don't win championships.
And listen, I'm going to play devil's advocate as somebody who gets on the show all the time and says, you know, the penalty controversies that we have during the season and stuff like that, that just creates more conversation and more debate and ultimately more attention on the NFL. So it's a double-edged sword of alienating the people who are watching the games with bad product versus, hey, this actually could benefit the team. And Jerry Jones's equation is, hey, I know that I may, make somebody mad during a contract negotiation. It may cost me a couple extra million, but it keeps the Dallas Cowboys relevant. We're always at the top of the conversation. That's what the argument is.
If you want to be relevant that way, sure, go ahead. That's not good relevancy. Like, I don't know.
And I agree. And I bring up that stance because that's a stance that someone would take to potentially defend Jerry Jones's act. I'm sure that might be his justification. And throughout the 90s and early 2000s, when the contract stuff wasn't as complicated and as complex and as difficult to deal with as it is in the modern NFL, he doesn't see the value of the contract stuff. He thinks the business side of it and the relevancy side of it is actually more important in the give and take.
And does he see the value in player power anymore either? I don't know if he's moved on. He's evolved in that way too. I think he hates that part of it. I don't think he likes Parsons having control or leverage in any way. Yeah.
It all makes sense. The value of making your player angry, because in the 90s and the early 2000s, before social media was big, make your player angry. What's that? He might tell a couple newspaper reporters, Jerry's a jerk, you know what I mean? And then it's in the Dallas Times and then it's gone. But now the players have way more power and the contract stuff is way more complex. And to be a great football team and stay a great football team, you have to be so high level with how you structure contracts, when you do your contracts to extract maximum value. That's why we see teams like the Bengals and the Cowboys who don't value that stuff and are behind the curve on how important that stuff is. They struggle and they worry more about some of the things that are maybe not as important, that were more important back in the day. So I think ultimately, everything that we're talking about here is a lack of value on the things that are more important in the modern NFL sphere and an overvaluation of the things that used to be more important, like the relevancy and being on the national talking shows before social media. So I think Jerry, I don't think he's insane. I think this probably was smart at some time during his process, but the game, for, catch-all term, has passed him by.
Yeah, I think even him talking about why he hired Schottenheimer as his coach, he's like, I've seen this before. I just think he acts like he has it all figured out, and he just refuses to evolve. He might just be crazy enough. Like, normally this ends in a contract getting done. And, Tyler, I think odds are if I was a betting man, I'd put it on a deal getting done. He's just stubborn and crazy enough, though, that if Parsons takes this far enough, like, I don't think Terry McLaurin's getting dealt, but Parsons, it's not a 0% chance. Like, I think there is some chance if this keeps dragging out, maybe he's dealt.
Well, listen, I don't think that that's off base at all. Yeah. I think that this has gotten to a point where it could just get ugly enough, and the Cowboys are stubborn enough, and they believe in their process enough, and they say, fine, we will get rid of you, and we'll show you. That would be a disaster move. But if they do it, who could Micah Parsons get traded to? We'll discuss that. Plus, big news in Buffalo on multiple fronts. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold, great ginger and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot, whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends. This is a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course and even off it, you need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. I know it's training camp right now. Football is back. I got to make sure that I'm on top of my game all the time for all the stuff I got going on, and 5 Hour Energy make sure to help with that. I do love to golf as well, and golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors, of course. The great ginger lime flavor gives you the best of your clubhouse go-to without having to chase down the bev cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that's 5 Hour Energy, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONGolf to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion-flavored 5-hour energy shots today. All right, Louie, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about the big news with Micah Parsons and the fallout, really, for the Dallas Cowboys as an organization. But again, if they are dumb enough to trade one of the best players in the entire NFL and one of the true game changers in the league, who could be an option? And Louis, start to look at some teams, and the usual suspects are always teams that are going to be mentioned: the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Bills, the this and that. But start to look closer, some teams that I think could make sense. What about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? The Bucs don't truly have that elite edge rusher right now. They have a good defensive scheme and good talent. They really have a talented offense. Baker Mayfield dealing with a little bit of a hand issue. We'll see whether he participates in practice this week. They have joint practices against the Tennessee Titans, the Buccaneers do this week. So we'll see if Baker Mayfield is there. But the Bucs seem like a team that's really, really good and is maybe like one player away, especially in that edge rusher spot. If the Buccaneers got Micah Parsons right now, I think they would be up there with like how I see the Los Angeles Rams. It's like, no, I could see them making the push.
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually on Locked On Eagles the other day talking about teams that could push the Eagles that we're not talking about, and Tampa Bay is one that came up. And they do have Hassan Reddick, and I'm still a believer in Reddick. I think he can bounce back to be who he was in 2022, 2023, but he's no Micah Parsons, and he's only on a one-year deal. If you add Parsons on the other side of Reddick, like now suddenly that's, already a good defense. Now we're talking about potentially a top 3 team in that conference. I look at another team that's competing for a Super Bowl in the NFC that's just desperate for pass rushing talent right now because they're just bleeding with injuries, is the Detroit Lions. I just think they make all the sense in the world. That was a team that had to bring in Zadarius Smith halfway through the year last year because, Aiden Hutchinson was injured. We've got McNeil injured. Like they're really thin on both sides of the line. I look at Detroit too right now, Tyler, as a team that they're trying to go all in still and maximize this window. I think a team in the NFC, I don't know if Jerry Jones would trade him in the conference. Everybody keeps saying the Eagles because I think Parsons wants to be there, but Jerry Jones is never trading him inside the NFC, outside of the NFC, especially not Philly. I think Detroit and Tampa make the most sense.
Yeah, I agree. They would be teams that I think are in a position with their timeline as a team where they would be willing to do it, and it would probably be appealing to Micah as well. Especially Florida, no state taxes. You're getting ready to get $45 million a year. Pretty good place to cash in on that contract. You have Baker, who's a guy you can count on. There's some other stars on the team, and they're a good team with strong defensive leadership with Todd Bowles too, so I could see how that would make a ton of sense. But I do question, we could say the Cowboys may be dumb enough to trade Micah Parsons because of their hubris, but that same hubris would probably also lead them to not trading him anywhere in the NFC, period. Like, I even think the Lions, that may not be the NFC East, but are they going to want to watch Micah Parsons on Thanksgiving after that? Just stuff Jerry thinks about that stuff. So I look at the AFC, and I found it interesting. My guy, Tony Wiggins, the host of the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL in the barbershop, he threw his team in the AFC, another team in Florida as well, the Jaguars, into the mix and made his pitch for Micah Parsons.
So Micah Parsons wants to trade, huh? Let me see. What would it take for the Jacksonville Jaguars to get somebody like that? Well, first of all, I try to keep both of my young edge rushers. That's what I would do. Because I would tell Dallas most of the time he plays standing up. So maybe Devin Lloyd and a first-round pick. If you want me to throw in a running back like Travis Etienne, we could probably arrange that also. We're deep at defensive back too. Just tell us what you need. But we're going to keep Micah standing up here in Jacksonville as a pass rusher, stack linebacker. Move Trayvon inside a little bit on third down. I think I could go for it. Now they're going to have to figure out a way to pay him and Trayvon Walker while they're paying Trevor Lawrence and Josh, but maybe they can get away with it because they have 2 dynamic wide receivers who are on rookie deals. That's my proposal. It's Tony Wiggins with Locked On Jaguars.
I love the idea here, but there's no way that I would allow that to happen. Now, what I do think that we have stumbled upon is a pretty decent proposal. If Travon Walker is a guy who needs a new contract, who's coming up on the end of his rookie deal, he's been a solid player. Is he a Micah Parsons level player? No. Very good against the run, very physical, blossoming a little bit as a pass rusher, even though he's a secondary guy. I think if you included a guy like Travon Walker, who the Cowboys could sign to a deal, but wouldn't be as expensive as Micah Parsons, Travon Walker probably isn't in a position to demand as much as Micah Parsons, which could make it feel more palatable. And I feel like the Cowboys could walk away and say, hey, we got a good young player who's ascending and getting better. We got him at a better price than what we got for this other malcontent guy who mouthed off about us in the media. And we got some picks back. So give us your second-round pick this year, Travon Walker, and, a fourth-round pick. And maybe that would make it more, because I think the Cowboys aren't just going to take picks back like a rebuilding team getting rid of one of their top guys. I think they're going to want players who they can look at their fan base and say, no, we're still trying to win.
How about two of the most inept front offices in the league do a deal where they just swap bad contract situations? The Cincinnati Bengals call up Dallas, say, we're more willing to pay the younger pass rusher, Micah Parsons. Jerry Jones, I could totally see being like, I like what Hendrickson did. In good faith, he reported to camp. That's what Parsons should do. We're going to pay him instead. Let's just switch Trey Hendrickson for Micah Parsons. Maybe that makes sense. But no, in all seriousness, I think another team we're not talking about in the AFC that's trying to take that next step to become a Super Bowl contender. What about the Chargers? I mean, Khalil Mack's an older player. No more Joey Bosa there. Maybe try to take that next step by bringing Parsons in. I could see somebody like that, but you're right. I just can't imagine Jerry Jones going to trade him to a contender in the NFC. I don't think he's just going to take, multiple second and third round picks. I think he would want a player in return. So I think if there is a trade, it's going to be a Jerry Jones kind of trade. I don't think he's just shipping him off wherever Parsons wants to go.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. I saw some people say, because obviously when things like this happen, it's good to, so everybody's like, hey, the Titans, they should do it. This is a good one. Now, if I'm Micah Parsons, I don't want to come play for the 3-14 Tennessee Titans. But the point is, a lot of people's response to that was, why would Micah Parsons want to play for the Titans? And you're right, why would he? But why would the Dallas Cowboys have to send Micah Parsons where he wants to go? Like, this isn't like the NBA. Like, the players have more power now, like we're talking about, but it's not quite the NBA where you can Anthony Davis, that's all folks on your T-shirt.
Right, how many of these trade requests have actually ended up being trades? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's a negotiation tactic, but that's it.
100%. So it's just not quite like that. So I think Dallas would take the best deal possible, and that's, you mentioned Terry McLaurin earlier, and I put in the show notes and here on the YouTube screen, like, McLaurin for Micah, like, just swap your problems. Makes zero sense for the Cowboys to add a third wide receiver and pay him at 31 if they don't want to pay Micah Parsons. But I mean, the idea is that these teams are in tough spots, and I guess I just don't know who's going to break
first. They put themselves in the tough spot, though. I just don't, you could avoid this. Why would you not? Of course you want Micah Parsons. There's no reason to not pay Terry McLaurin either. The Commanders are like, we're totally fine billing the oldest team in the NFL. But Terry McLaurin's where we draw the line. He's 30 years old. We can't pay that guy. That's been our only relevant offensive player for a decade. So, at least, 6-7 years. I think these teams, the Commanders, the Cowboys, the Bengals, they're getting in their own way, and it just feels like they're trying to pinch pennies. And it ends up in the end, like, from a salary cap perspective, it doesn't help you by waiting. I don't know. I think being proactive, when you know you're going to keep them long term, if you actually have real reservations about keeping the player, then I would get this. But I don't believe that any of these teams don't want these players.
Well, Louis, it goes back to an old school mentality for me.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm going to hit before I get hit. I want to be proactive. If I get backed into a corner, I'm not going to wait for somebody. That's something.
Right.
My dad always said, hey, don't get in fights at school, but if they're about to hit you, don't get hit first.
Right.
And
point, yeah.
A lot of these teams, like the Cowboys and Bengals, they just wait to get hit, and then they're shocked when they're getting whooped, and it's you waited
coming.
for this to happen. Now,
the terms of the contract, so yeah.
Doesn't always do that. A team that can do things the right way is the Buffalo Bills, and that's a team who I think makes a ton of sense for Micah Parsons. They are a team that has some good pieces on the defensive line that could be sent back in a trade. They seem to want to stack out their defense rather than stack out weapons on offense. But I honestly think that they make the most sense of any team for Terry McLaurin as well. So if you could give Parsons or McLaurin to the Bills, what do you think actually is the better fit for them?
Parsons makes so much sense on that defense. If I'm the Bills, I want Terry McLaurin. I was disappointed they didn't strike for DK Metcalf. I thought that was the perfect receiver for Josh Allen. I thought the price was very reasonable. I was kind of disappointed Buffalo didn't do that. Here's another opportunity. I just think, again, Allen won MVP carrying a bunch of 2s and 3s at receiver. Can he do it again? Of course, but why make him? I mean, I think you saw how clearly the offense was elevated with a prime Stephon Diggs and Terry McLaurin in that offense. Like, that's just, they don't have a true alpha in that core, and I think they need that to, take that next step.
Well, things got even worse for the Buffalo Bills skill position players over the weekend. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute that you want to head to a ball game with family or friends? Maybe it's game day. You suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money that you save on tickets, you can spend even more on food, drinks, merch, even invite a bigger group. Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. They've got incredible last-minute deals. You get a panoramic view from your seat before you buy your tickets, and they have the lowest price guarantee that takes the worrying out of buying. It's why I buy all my tickets on Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, Louis, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about the Micah Parsons trade, the fallout for the Cowboys, some potential landing spots. We talked about the Buffalo Bills as a pretty good landing spot for Micah Parsons. But the Buffalo Bills, I agree with you, Louis, I think are actually the best possible landing spot for Terry McLaurin, not only for McLaurin, but for the Bills as well. And that became even more clear on Sunday over the weekend when we got an injury to Khalil Shakir, I would say the top wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills. Their talented slot wide receiver got hurt. He's week to week going forward with a lower body injury. It's something to keep an eye on, because I think the big weakness for the Bills, as we have discussed, is that skill position talent. And then it also got even worse as James Cook sat out practice, and when was asked by reporters why, he simply said, quote, business. So without James Cook at full potential, maybe, if he's behind it all, if they don't have Shakir at full health going into the season, that makes it tough for Josh Allen to do what you said just a second ago and kind of carry a bunch of number 2 level players to something serious like a Super Bowl.
Yeah, and again, he can do it, but you shouldn't have to ask him to do that every single year. And when you look at their receiving core, Shakir, I think Keon Coleman is the highest ceiling. If anybody's going to break out in 2025, it's Keon Coleman. But Shakir, he was that go-to player last year, had over 800 receiving yards, got an extension this offseason. Allen likes to throw to that kind of player, like Cole Beasley before Shakir had a lot of chemistry with Allen. So, especially with Allen being more of a methodical, just kind of surgical player in the pocket, he likes to throw to slot receivers now. So that's a big injury. And if it leaks into the season, again, they've got Coleman, they've got, Josh Palmer, Curtis Samuel, Elijah Moore. It's just a bunch of guys. I really think if they don't have James Cook, that was their other alpha on the offense, I just think that's asking Allen a lot to carry this football team. And they're trying to get over the hump to win a Super Bowl. And I don't know. To me, it's he can do it, but they need to add more at some point, and they definitely need Shakir back, because I think that's that one safe bet. You're getting a reliable target in the offense. Even Dalton Kincaid I don't feel as good about as I do Shakir.
Well, that's where Dalton Kincaid never really took that, how we talk about Trey McBride right now and Brock Bowers right now is what people were talking Dalton Kincaid was going to be with Josh Allen. That hasn't really happened. So I agree with you. The player that I really would look at, and if, 3 months from now, we're the Bills are set, they don't need it, it's because Keon Coleman took a big jump, and my guy Joe Marino from Locked On Bills talked about that possibility earlier this week.
I think what I've seen from Keon Coleman so far this year is a more physical player, a player that's more nuanced in creating leverage, right? So he's not always going to run away from people, but can he put himself in positions with his physicality to leverage at the catch point and be an available target, and then use that physicality to sustain himself and make plays on the ball. I think he's shown some growth there. And I've also seen more of an understanding of space versus zone coverage and kind of where to break off routes and where to be available based on the rotation of the coverage. So I've seen a lot of good growth there. But if we're expecting Keon Coleman to be a guy that's going to have the full route tree available to him, that's going to be able to separate consistently from man coverage, I think that's an unfair expectation of the player that he is.
Okay, so beautiful points there about his skill set and what he could be. Here's my point. Even if Keon Coleman does take the leap, take a step forward, turn into a dominant physical alpha receiver, which is what he's supposed to be, that Terry McLaurin, Khalil Shakir when he's back, you can not rush him back because you got it. Dalton Kincaid, James Cook, like that is a good enough cast of characters. That's with Keon Coleman's skill set, Terry McLaurin's skill set, and then Shakir's skill set, all being 3 different skill sets, that is a perfect collection of talent to look at that and be like, oh, that's good enough to go win a Super Bowl for Josh Allen.
It allows everybody to play the actual role that their potential says they are. Keon Coleman's a 2 right now, being asked to play the 1. Shakir is a 3, in my opinion, being asked, or 2, being asked to be a 1. And so if you get a Terry McLaurin or you had a Stephon Diggs,
new Stephon Diggs, better attitude.
And I agree with Joe. I don't think Keon Coleman's ever going to be this elite separator, a true alpha number 1. But can he be a poor man's DK Metcalf, or even going back to, I always make an Eagles analogy, an Alshon Jeffrey type that's good at a couple things, but he's very good at it. I think he's a high-end number 2 receiver. I think that's a solid player that you just can't ask to be the true number 1. So I think they're just one player away still, and I think Stephon Diggs just kind of did a number on that organization a little bit, and they don't really seem to feel any rush to get that kind of player. But I think if they got that, it allows everybody else to, because like you said, if they add a Terry McLaurin kind of player, Coleman, Shakir, Kincaid, Cooks is a great supporting cast. They just need their true number 1.
Well, Louie, you know how it goes sometime after you have a bad breakup. You go to the total opposite end of the spectrum, and then halfway through, you're like, maybe that was a little too far away from the sun.
There's a middle ground, right?
Yeah, I need to find my way. So maybe the Bills are in the process right now of kind of realizing where that middle ground is going to be. You can tell I've been watching way too many reality romance TV shows during the offseason.
Bachelor in Paradise every Monday.
All the Love Island and the Perfect Man. They're everywhere. They're everywhere always. But don't worry, folks, because football is back. It's right around the corner. Preseason is coming this week. We have made it. Lock in, folks. The NFL is here, but that's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On NFL. I am your host, the Madman, Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, Louie the Legacy DiBiase, as we tell you every single episode. Thanks for tuning in, and stay safe out there.